we're deciding who we're trying to become. And then you start making decisions in your business towards that person that we're trying to become. And frankly, she's already in there, but we're just
Right.
it's just gonna make us more or less of what we already are.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in on another episode of Behind the Scenes. And today I have my lovely guest, Lynda McDonell, and she is a financial life and business coach who specializes in working with female small business owners. And I'm not going to take away from I'm not going to read all of her story, but I will let her introduce herself and tell us how she got started in her business. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Emma. It's great to be here. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited for you to share with us your background and your knowledge in finance and your background in being a CPA, because I know that's something that's very overwhelming for any new entrepreneur or maybe even mid to bigger size entrepreneurs, CEOs. Finance can be a conversation of uncomfort for some people, but I would love to hear kind of how you got started in the industry, what drew you to it, and then what made you shift from corporate to running your own business.
Yeah, I'd love to share my story, because I think it's really important to understand that we all have our own stories. We all come to this in different ways. But I originally did start my career as a CPA. So, but even before that, I was, what you would consider, I was a bit of a numbers person. Like numbers came naturally to me. And I understood money really early in my life. And my father was actually a stock analyst. And he worked on, we lived in Canada. So he worked on what's the equivalent of Wall Street, which is called Bay Street. And
Right.
what's that?
I said, right. The equivalent, because you're in Canada. I knew that, but like I'd forgotten.
Well, I'm in the US now, but at the time I grew up in Canada. And so my parents were separated. And so on the weekend, he would have a lot of work to catch up on. So he would, take my brother and I, put us up, onto the subway. We'd go downtown into this big, tall office tower, and he'd be doing work and I'd be running around and I'd be asking him, "Hey, Dad, like, what are you doing?" Like, because that's what little girls do. We ask a lot of questions. And he
Oh,
was so great and generous. And he would really tell me little things, like little bits and things that he used to do. He would also take me to annual meetings of companies. And because that would be in the summer, he'd have us, he'd be like, "Okay, well, this is what we're going to do." And I remember sitting in these big conference rooms, like a little kid, with like all of these like executives talking about their company. And what it allowed me is really to not be scared of business, not be scared of money. When I was 18, I bought my very first stock. I used it to invest. It paid off my down payment on my first house when I was 24 years old. We bought our first house, and that's where the money came from. So, I mean, now I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there's a magic bullet to stock investing. I've learned a lot like over the years. And there's a lot of things that I could talk about that if we ever wanted to talk about that. But I think suffice to say, numbers was always around me when I was younger. And so
that's so important. Like
yeah,
you said, not to be afraid of it. You were used to it.
I was used to it. But that's what I didn't realize, is that there were so many that didn't have this
Right.
knowledge. And I didn't think about that till much, much later. So, as I said, I went into my career as a CPA, did that for a little while. Then I moved into corporate finance. I worked for a very, very large corporate 100 company, working with them, helping them guide their finances, doing the analysis, the accounting, all that stuff I helped out with. And then I stayed home for a very long time with my kids. I made that choice when my husband also had a corporate job. We were moving around and we made that decision. And during that time, I had so many people, friends, family, would just strike up conversations with me because they knew my background and they knew it. And so they'd ask me questions about their money, about their business. I didn't think anything of it. And I'd be like, "Yeah, you just do this, you do this, you do this." And part of it's because it just was something I knew. It became so natural to me. I didn't realize that other people didn't
Money.
necessarily. Yeah. So then as my boys got a little bit older and they were starting to fly the nest and they didn't need me as much anymore, I was trying to figure out what my next chapter was. And
Right.
that's when one of these friends who had been asking me about money just came right out and she said, Lynda, will you coach me? And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. Didn't think much of it. We started doing it. And I realized, oh my goodness, like there is so much, like one, this is my zone of genius. And
Right.
there is so much that I can impart on these women. And I came to realize as I started working with more and more clients that not all of us were gifted with what I was gifted with, that not all of us had healthy conversations about money in our homes growing up. Maybe, it was the conversation of where is the next bill going to come from, or we watched our parents fighting about money, or we just aren't numbers people. Let's be honest, that's not all our zones of genius. Some of us are much more creative and, have different great things that they're good at, and just money and numbers isn't one of them. And I also realized that that knowledge I had when I was younger, it all did come from a male perspective, but because I was so young and because it was my dad and I was a daddy's girl, he explained it to me in such a nice way that I could
Yeah.
understand that that's not how most of us heard it. And it's coming from this voice that they don't really understand. And so I realized that I had an opportunity to translate that and have women understand money and numbers in a way that makes sense to them, right? We take things in, we have much, usually generally, I'm being general, but much more of an emotional attachment to things. And, we want to feel connected to money. And sometimes we just don't because of the way it's been explained to us. We want to make impact in our lives and in our businesses, and really trying to help understand money from that perspective is where I've landed in my business. And that's what I've been doing for the last few years. And I absolutely love it.
I love your story because I think it's so inspiring to hear that your dad did this with you. He took the time to explain this to you because I came from a home where money, yeah, we went to work with our parents once in a while, but it was mostly conversations where fighting or we didn't have enough. And like, I think that's something my generation is now so much more aware of with their parenting because I see it as a topic of conversation of like how to address this with your kids is just being in that space right now is like I just had the conversation with Charlotte about savings accounts, like things that my parents never were able to do for us or had the extra income to do. I was like, I'm going to put her money that she keeps getting and is sitting in my bedroom in the savings account. And she's like, well, why do I need this? And I was like, well, the bank will pay you basically if you let your money sit in there. It's better than it's sitting on my like bookcase or your bookcase in a piggy bank kind of thing. So I think having those conversations are so powerful because, like you said, it shaped you got comfortable with the numbers piece. It shaped who you were. But I don't think I realized until like I started my business that you have to one know the numbers and then two there's like a relationship with money because I'm a numbers person, but I had such a thing around money when I started my business because I never felt like I could like just simple things. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna let like my now husband, like I took care of it when I was a single mom, but it still was like me always chasing it. I didn't have a good relationship with it. I never like it wasn't until like this last year I'm like, oh, I don't trust myself with money because I had always like overspent or was in debt or etc. So I think it is like a two part. You have to know and understand those financial systems within your business, but then having a good relationship, which sounds so weird to some people, I think.
It does sound weird, but it's actually not. And I think that we all have a relationship with money. I mean, even me who really knows all the nuts and bolts of it and understands the technicalities of it, I still struggle with my relationship with money. There are still things that I have to work on every day. I see these little voices in my head that come up and it's like, that will say, no, Lynda, you're not entitled to this. You have
Right.
to really you have to invite it in. You have to bring in the value that earns that money. There are things that sometimes I do have thoughts about scarcity, but the thing that I've been able to practice is that we start to get onto ourselves, and we have to just notice when those thoughts are getting in the way. So it doesn't matter, like you can know all of the things, but if you're not alongside of it, paying attention to who you are around money and who you are becoming and want to become around money, then
Mhm.
the success isn't going to be there.
Yeah,
I like the example of, like, if you think of a professional sports player, right? They weren't always a professional sports player. They
right.
started many years before, but they had to train like one. They had to start believing they could be one before they were one. And
Yes.
it's the same way with money. We have to start believing that we're capable of earning it. We have to start believing that we're capable of holding on to it. We have to start believing that we're capable of spending it smartly and intentionally before
Yes.
maybe we actually do, and we are actually able to do that. But we have to work on all of that at the same time that we're working on creating all these systems and knowing all what can lead to what and all of those things, the plans and this and that. They're both like very intimately connected. And I think a lot of people don't realize that until
Right.
they start noticing their own money mindset. And it's like, holy smokes, this is why things happened.
I would love to hear your input slash like giving an example of in my business or in other people's businesses that I've worked in. Like I've worked in a couple female entrepreneur businesses. Is like you can know the numbers, you can know like what your break even point is. I think this is the hard part for a lot of women to, well, any business owner, it's not just women, but it's just because we work with women more. Um, you can have that prediction. You can have that, like, this is the best case scenario. This is like my worst case scenario. This is my scale. But then it doesn't always go according to plan in reality. So how do we make those two align better? So, because I've noticed, like, then that's where the relationship starts to deteriorate. Like, if they build like that trust, but then the plan doesn't go accordingly. So it's hard to, feel like money's there for you or that you are attracting, it starts to wear on that relationship.
It sure does. It sure does. And that's why part of knowing all these things with your money is starting to get ahead of your money so that you can trust it. Like the
Mhm.
more that we start to look out for our future self, and this isn't our future self of our retirement self. I think that's what a
Oh,
lot of people always think of, is that when we talk about our future self, we're thinking of, well, retirement. And yes, I don't want to like say we don't think about that. That is all
yeah.
important. But it can even just be little things of, yeah, I know my break even, but how do I look out for myself next month if the sales don't come in as I want? How do I look out for myself 3 months from now? If the cycle of my business has changed, it's really important to try to look out for that future self, even in, or a future business,
Yeah.
really, just little by little. And it doesn't always start. I think that's why a lot of people see retirement as something that's just so far away and so unrelatable. And
Hmm.
I like to say, let's just look out for next month, 2 months from now. We don't have to like solve all of the problems of the world,
Right,
but
right.
you can know all the things. But that's the thing, is sometimes it just becomes like this machine. And we can create systems around looking out for our future self. Like we can absolutely do that, but there is that balance. And when you really start looking out for your future self, you start thinking of what could happen, what obstacles could happen. How am I going to create a strategy for those obstacles? When you start thinking about that in your business, we become so much less reactive. So
That's
even
a
if you may know where to put all the things when they happen, part of money is that it's a result, but it's also an indicator.
mhm.
And that's a big thing, is really teaching. I really work a lot on teaching my business owners to see it more as an indicator and not so much as a result, because sometimes the result can end up, we can use it against ourselves really easy. And when you're seeing something as an indicator, our brains are a lot more expansive. We're looking to solve problems
Right.
as opposed to this didn't happen the way I want. I didn't break even this month. I wasn't profitable. I don't have the cash flow I need to pay X, Y, and Z. Those are all things where we punish ourselves. And it's no wonder people don't like money when that's the discussion that they're having with a tax provider or a bookkeeper, as
Right.
opposed to let's solve problems. Let's see what's possible. How do we
Oh,
create that possibility? All of
yeah.
those types are very, very different.
They get down on themselves. They think like they're the reason or there's something wrong. I wouldn't, I think that's something I've recently started to like adopt more in my business is saying like, okay, the number isn't what I want. What is contributing to that number? Is it my offers? Is it where I'm marketing? Is it the sales like where is the issue in that pipeline, so to speak, to help alleviate those problems? And I would love to hear about like what kind of themes you're seeing with your clients that they run into, because you kind of mentioned that you teach them to see it as an indicator, but what are some of the common things that a lot of your clients struggle with or are running into when it comes to that financial relationship and the financial systems?
That's a really good question, because it is something that I do love talking about, is how this can all tell a story and using your finances to craft that story, the story that has happened, but also the story that you want to create.
Oh,
And so a lot of this, when we're looking at the numbers, there's a lot of things that I see. I'll say very common ones are if they're so concerned about not paying tax that they put a bunch of personal expenses into their business. That's not what I'm here to talk. I don't work for the IRS. I have no interest in policing that. The problem that I see though is that it then takes away the possibility of them doing a few things. One is they cannot then understand how their business, what it really costs to run their business. Like what it
yeah.
really costs, like how they make decisions in running their business, if they're just sort of sneaking things in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then robbing themselves of cash flow because they might be putting something in order to get a deduction, but yet they still have to pay for it. So they're still losing money, right? Like losing or giving out cash for that. And they sort of think, well, it's a business deduction. I can put it in there. But it's like, is that the right thing for your business? And if you're looking out for your future self, could we have put that money somewhere else as opposed to being so concerned about adding, having your expenses? The other thing I find is that when business owners do that, they rob themselves of the ability to pay themselves. Flat out write themselves a check, whether it doesn't matter if you're an S corp and you get payroll or you take a distribution, that's neither here nor there. But the act of being paid from working on our mind and learning to trust money is very different than if we just have our business pay for something. Same impact in terms of the result, but a very different way for us to understand our life in money. Because to me, there's two parts, right? We are a business owner and the CEO, but then when we allow ourselves to be paid well, then we all of a sudden give ourselves the ability to be a CEO in our life.
Yep. Yep.
Make those decisions, like separate the two, so that we can decide, hey, what do we want to do in our personal life? Do we want to have a vacation? What's important to me? How do I create that personal life for ourselves? Simply because also, one of the other reasons is that our business isn't always going to be there until the day we pass away. And for a lot of reasons, we could sell the business. And if that's what we want to do, then we have to work on creating a business to sell, not creating
I love that conversation.
money, right? Or it's just the business might change. Like we have to somewhat separate ourselves. And I think that is and there's so many layers to it. Like you might hear very commonly, separate your personal and business expenses because the IRS doesn't like it, but that's not the reason.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true, but that's just to me a really small part of it. It's about you become so much more empowered when you're able to look at your business for what it is. You look at it much more objectively. You separate yourself. You really do become that CEO. I talk a lot about that, is treating your business and your life like you're the CEO of it.
Right.
And in our business, we're employee number one.
That's what
So
I was gonna say. I kind of see it as you definitely want to keep them separate, like accounting and soft, like tracking wise. But have always, when I talk to people, not that I'm a financial person at all, don't take my advice, but like when I'm looking at it, I see so many people who forget to just like take into account their personal expenses, and they'll just like won't know what the number is that they need to pay themselves. I'm like, you kind of do need to look at it in the sense of like a holistic, what are all of the expenses, but you want to do it as, these are my personal expenses that like need to be covered. Like I need to pay myself at least this much, like before I can invest in something else in my business. Like, cause like you just said, you're employee number one. What do you need to live comfortably outside of it?
exactly. And when we don't see ourselves that way, again, and we see ourselves as last. We put
Yep.
ourselves last. We don't think then we're worthy of it. And then that's playing it's playing a script in the back of our head that's saying, well, you're not really worthy of that money. Like you don't really deserve your money. You just run your business. You go help people, fulfill whatever their needs are. But your needs, they're not as big of a deal, right? Like that's that money stuff that we have to work on at the same time that we're actually working on the dollars and the cents of it. We really have to work on who we think we are
Right.
when it comes to our finances. Because if we're not, that's the stuff that happens, is we just always put ourselves last. But yet we could hire an employee and we'll hire them and we'll be like, well, no, we have to pay them. They have a family, they have a mortgage or rent or blah, blah, blah to pay. Like we take on that type of ownership when we hire someone, whether it's a contractor or an employee, doesn't matter.
Yep.
But we don't do it for ourselves.
Right, right. Yeah, they don't think about paying what's the minimum I need to pay myself to live. Like, and you're doing all the work. You should be taking home a majority of that money because you are the one creating the results and doing everything.
Yeah. And we might feel shy to put that cost in our pricing. And
Yep.
it's wait a minute, like you started this business, you obviously started it because you have a zone of genius. Just like I
Hmm.
talked earlier that I have mine, every entrepreneur who starts a business has a zone of genius. That's why they started their business. So
Right.
people are paying for that, whether it's a skill in producing a product, whether it's a service they provide, doesn't matter. But they don't think about that. And they're so concerned of, well, people won't pay for something, people won't buy something, so I can't price it this way. And they just consistently sell themselves short.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to, because I was having this conversation earlier with another guest of not understanding, and you brought it up too, is not understanding the true cost of what it goes in to serve or sell a product or a service, because the pricing behind either or is going to look different depending on what you offer. But from like a logistic background, I'm like, you need to know what goes into each unit, whether in each client, and so many entrepreneurs or small business owners, if they're service providers or coaches, they don't factor in their own time that goes into it, and they just shy away from it. And I will tell my clients, like, you should do a time tracking exercise, whether that be 2 weeks at a minimum or a month at like a longer period, because the more data you have, the better it is for you. But they just shy away from the data because they don't want to know the truth.
Well, I'll be honest, that us service entrepreneurs are sometimes the worst at it.
Oh
And
yeah.
And here's the reason why is like, if we were to have a business where we created and sold a product, we
Mhm.
like, okay, we have to put out money for, I don't know, let's say we sold cupcakes. We would
Yeah.
have to buy all our flour, buy all our sugar, buy all of our cream and butter and all of those, they call them raw materials. We'd have to buy all
Yeah.
of that. We'd have
Yep.
to have all the equipment. We'd have to have
Yep.
a place to produce the equipment. We'd have to, do marketing and find like, so we would have a way to wrap our arms around what it costs to run our business.
Yeah.
But as service-based entrepreneurs, it's sometimes all coming from us. And it's
Mhm.
clear. And we don't, like you said, we might not track our time and we're not as crisp as we might need to be. We often will underestimate, or we feel shame in estimating what it really is because we
Oh,
think,
yeah.
and so there's so much there, but yet we're doing ourselves a disservice because then we're not able to set our pricing appropriately so that our pricing allows us to be able to pay that CEO and that service provider, because you're a CEO, but you're also a service provider. We have to
Yep.
think about that. And those are some of the little things that really help businesses turn around to become profitable when they start seeing that they have to think about all those things. And that not every cost is mandatory in running business. We have to be very mindful and intentional and selective. Every business is different. They're not all the
Mhm.
same. Even if you do the same things, they're not the same. And so really there's so much work that needs to be done more than just pricing based on what the person next to us is pricing for
Right.
something.
Exactly. And I'm gonna just put my one little tip for anyone watching. If you're a follower of mine, you've probably heard me talk about it, but if you're new, Time Bro. If you want to do a time tracking audit of yourself, I use Time Bro. You can pay for it for a quarter. I like to have it in my tech stack because one, it helps me with tracking to specific clients. Not that I don't charge hourly anymore, but it's still good information for me to have to know like, did I under or did I overquote this project? How can I adjust for the next one? Like you said, using that data as an indicator on like time spent versus what they paid. But Time Bro works in the background of your computer, so it's not as time consuming and cumbersome to track your time if that's why you're not doing it. So that's my little 2 cents is to try that software. You pay for it for a quarter and it would run in the background of your computer for you. And it like even tells me how long I'm spending in Slack, by Slack channel, like in my like it does all of it. So that's a little tool and tidbit to look at for data.
I love that tip. I love that. It sounds like an awesome, I don't use that tool. I might look into it, but it sounds like an awesome tool because of that. Like we sometimes will say, oh, my business isn't making money because of like, I don't have enough sales. But yet
Right.
maybe you don't need that much sales. It's just that we're spending so much more time than we actually ever estimated. And because we're spending all that time, it's taking away from us doing other things in our business.
Right.
So it might not be our pricing. It might not be that the environment has changed. I'm hearing a lot right now. Well, things have changed. We're in a bit of a recession and people aren't spending. It may have zero to do with that. It may not. I don't know. But if we don't have the data and the information behind it, we're going to just guess.
Oh yeah.
And so things like you just mentioned are fabulous because then we're no longer guessing and we're getting the real facts. And you can start to notice trends.
For yourself, yeah, it's so beneficial of like I've caught myself that I'm over giving to clients because that's just what happens. And I'm like, oh, I need to really set my boundaries better with how much I'm answering or how many hours I'm spending on their piece. And sometimes is just because, oh, I have a quick second, so I'm gonna do it. And that's all well and good because we want to make sure we're balancing customer service. But you also can't allow scope creep as a service provider.
Right. Right. And you won't notice it if you're
Mhm.
not keeping track of it. because it'll like, it's a creep, like you said, just like there's something called lifestyle creep, right? We make more money, we buy more things, we don't really notice until all of a sudden it's like, we notice. So that's exactly the same thing. And that's where you're able to make better decisions in your business because you're paying attention. Like money isn't all about dollars and cents. Money is about like the discipline that we create around our businesses, and it could be all kinds of numbers because they're all connected, right? Like the amount of money, the amount of time you're spending on something impacts the amount of money that you make.
Right.
It's not just about keeping track of the money that you make. It's about keeping track of all those and understanding how it all comes together like a little puzzle. And all our businesses have different little puzzles.
Yeah.
To know how they're all put together.
And I think
And
that's another thing, going back to the holistic of paying yourself. People don't track like, or think, oh, I need to pay myself for doing this admin task or doing this marketing thing. Like they don't factor that into what they feel like they deserve to be paid for in their business, to kind of like what you're saying, you're not tracking it and you're not aware.
Exactly. And not to mention that because we're all honestly, there's very few of us that aren't trying to grow our business, that as you grow your business, the more you are paying attention to that, of like maybe how you're spending, let's say, use your example of the admin tasks, how much time you're spending on that, then you can really make a very clear decision. Is this the time to bring someone into my business?
Right.
How much time is this actually taking of mine? And then you could see, wow, I'm spending this much time on a task that I'm really not that good at. So I could bring someone in to do this task. Probably it's going to take them less time because it's their zone of genius. So there's that. But also then your CEO activities are diverted towards much higher value things.
Right. Yes. I love that. I love this conversation because I love having it. I've talked about it a lot on the channel, is those data-driven decisions, being the CEO, stepping in, you're not being reactive, you're being proactive when you know your numbers, and obviously delegating and getting that support because they can be quicker sometimes than you would be. And what could you do with those 6 to 10 hours a week? Like for me, it was, I'm going to get 6 to 10 hours back with my kids because I was spending 10 to 12-hour days. So the tasks were still getting done and I wasn't having to spend half the night doing them. And I could get some sleep back and be a better mom and be a better business owner because I wasn't like sacrificing sleep. And it only cost me like $600 a month, the kind of thing. I mean, I knew that I had it in the budget, or I knew I had to factor that into pricing. So I would love to hear your take on with I think going on this conversation of the numbers and the fear, and then like being able to delegate out, because you have to overcome the first two to be able to get to that point of hiring. Is what do you see with your clients, or how can we overcome that fear around the numbers and the money and making those data-driven decisions? Because of, like you mentioned before, some people are just really, really creative and they didn't grow up with the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I talk a lot about with clients is the concept of dating your data.
Oh, I love it.
It's really about building a relationship with your data. So if you think about if you were trying to meet a future partner, what would we do? We're not all of a sudden on the first date going to invite them to move in. That doesn't happen. We're going to go out first, we're not going to call them right away. Like we might wait a few days to call. And we're going to go out. Maybe we'll go out for a lunch. Then we'll start going out for dinner. And on those dinners, we'll start thinking, what do you like? What do you like to do in your free time? What do you like to eat? And you start to find, it's like, okay, well, this doesn't help me, but wow, this is really interesting. I'm really digging this. And it's the same thing with getting to know the numbers and the data and information behind our business. So the one thing I never say is to jump right in, because you're going to feel like you're drowning in a bunch of numbers and cents. And like you said, if you're not a numbers person and you're more of a creative, then you're just going to go crazy. And look, even me, I don't love like a lot of numbers. I like it very simplified
Oh yeah.
and very like important. Like I don't love sitting there looking at a profit and loss statement. That doesn't excite me. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. But what excites me is when I can pick out a couple of numbers because I
Yeah.
know the drivers of my business. And when I can pick out a couple of things, right? So that's what I'm saying in terms of if you think of it as like dating, it's like we're just trying to get our feet wet. We're trying to figure out what are the real important things that are make or break for me, for my business.
Right.
Similar to a partner, there are things that if they do it, you're like, no go. It's the same thing with our business. If our business is doing something and we know it, it's like, uh-oh, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I would really encourage people to think about when they're just starting this journey is, and even once you're in it, because you always, when you're in a relationship, you've always got a date. If you're
Yeah. I love
successful.
this analogy. I love it.
And so you have to just always think of it like that, as opposed to feeling like it's this grim reaper that's following us around. It can be so enlightening and so helpful and can actually save so much time.
Yeah. And like when you're dating, you learn so much more about yourself. So like you're gonna uncover some things in here that like going back to the relationship piece that you realize are maybe uncomfortable truths about yourself that you don't want to look at. But the more you do and the more you become aware, it's going to just make you a better person and a better business owner because you're gonna be able to come through that and learn and become stronger and get better at that piece. I think just going off of your analogy, because I love that analogy. I think that's so fun and so accurate. And you're right. It's not just that you get through it and then you're done. You keep dating, you keep growing as an entrepreneur.
And as things unfold, you decide, well, do I like that? And if I don't like it, how do I change it?
Yeah.
Is it a problem? And because it's not a one size fits all. Like, here's an example, and it's not in business, it's a personal example with some clients that I've had, but we can all relate to
Yeah.
is how much we spend on groceries every month.
Oh, I
So
hate.
I work with my clients, they'll like, figure out at some point when we work together how much they're spending on groceries. And the first thing they'll be like, is that too much? Like, is that right? Is that what I should be spending? And I'm like, whoa, hold on. Like, it's not about what you should be spending. How much do you want to spend? Is this important to you? Because look, someone who goes out 6 nights a week is going to have a really tiny grocery budget.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. If that's something that they highly value and is one of the most important things to them, that they love going out with their friends on the weekend and they'd rather do that than something else,
Mhm.
then that's fine. They can spend that amount of money, right? But we create these like, very black and white benchmarks that this is a problem, this is a problem. And it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
You don't want it. If you're someone who eating isn't really that much of a priority to you, but yet you would love to go buy, let's say you're a cyclist and you love to cycle and you're going to go
Yeah.
buy like a really awesome bike and that's how you want to spend your money and then great. That's
Right.
fine. It doesn't mean you get a gold star for how much you're spending on groceries. It's just
Yeah.
you choosing to deprioritize it or just in terms of what you're buying, right? You're not someone that has to buy all organic and much more fresh food. Like it's not about us to judge. It's about what works right for you. In this case, I'm giving a personal example, but similar to your business, what works right for your business? How does that engine run the most efficiently for you?
Yes.
Happy about it.
Right. And it's finding that balance too. And I think because like I made a purchase last year that I never would like it wasn't like I needed this purchase for my business, but it definitely helped me in my relationship with money, because I would always tell myself, you don't buy things at full price, you don't get nice things, you can't take care of nice things, this, that, and the other thing with my money story. And because we always bought on discount, my mom never bought, like, she's always, and she's still like this, she buys it, you only get it if it's on sale, was like her thing. So I spent like $200 on this purse, and it was like mind blowing to me at that point. But I was like, I want to be someone who can afford a purse like this. And I'm like, I use this purse so much because it's so functional. It carries my laptop. I had trips planned that year for work that I was going on. And it was still practical, but it just felt so good once it came in. And I care for this purse so much more. Like I just feel so good when I look at it, even though it costs way more than I was comfortable with. But I think that you do have to find that balance of like, what are you going to prioritize in your life and in your business?
100%. And I love what you said about where you said, I want to be someone who can afford this purse.
Right.
Again, right, going back to what I was talking about, future self, we're deciding who we're trying to become. And then you start making decisions in your business towards that person that we're trying to become. And frankly, she's already in there, but it's just gonna make us more or less of what we already are.
Right.
So it's all there. You're just becoming more comfortable with who that person is that you are. But it's always thinking about that. Well, how do I make that happen? How do I afford it? Rather than being like, well, I can't be that person that walks
Mm-hmm.
around that. Like, what are people going to think of me if I spend my money that way?
Right.
It's like, it doesn't matter. If that's who you're becoming, that's who we have to work on, and we'll create that business. I mean, you could be that business owner that says, I want to be a business owner that pays my employees above market.
Yes. Yeah. I
Fine.
love that.
Then let's create the business around it that does that.
Yes.
How do
I
you
think,
set to do that?
yeah, you're planning, you're not being, you're being proactive in that and what is aligning with your values. I think there's so many, I love so many topics that we could dive into for sure. And I am so appreciative of you coming on and sharing all these tips with us. If people want to find out more and get on your newsletter and get your tips, where can they find you? Because I follow you on Instagram, and she does offer such great content, such great tips. And where can they find you?
Thank you. No, my name of my company is Peak Prosperity. So PIQUE Prosperity. So that's my website, peakprosperity.com. All my social media handles are Peak Prosperity. I like to keep it really simple. But if they want to get a hold of me, so one of the things that I've actually just put out, because I had a lot of clients asking me about this, is how should I be running a month of my business? What should I be doing? Like, what are the things that I'm supposed to do and when?
Yeah.
And because part of it too is we just don't even know when we're supposed to be doing something. So I just put together it's called a CEO monthly money success checklist. So it's about knowing what you need to do each month. And so if they want to grab it, I'll give you the link and you can put it in the notes and the comments, show notes, so that it's available to them if that's something that they're interested in. But it's really about trying to create these systems with your money, just like you're helping clients create systems in their business, but creating these similar systems with our money. And it can just be easy as knowing what to do and when.
Yes, that is so true. And I think that's what overwhelms a lot of people, is you don't know what you don't know. Um, and we will link all of that in the show notes. And I don't know if you want to end on any other advice or piece of information, because I think that was also really good. But is there anything you'd want our audience to walk away from or walk away with as a
Um,
last piece of advice?
the only other thing that I would invite them to walk away with is that it's okay to outsource things related to money in your business. It's okay to outsource someone to do your taxes. It's okay to have a bookkeeper if that's what you want.
Yeah.
What I will say though is you still have to know what's going on, and you have to be able to give them good information. And if you're
Mhm.
not paying attention to the kind of information that you're giving them, the information that you're getting back, you can't leverage that information to take it to the next level. So like one thing I always say is you can't outsource being a CEO. I say it all the time
You
because
do.
it is, I do. It is your responsibility to know your numbers. It's not anyone else's responsibility to do that. They can help you with it 1,000%. They're amazing.
Yeah.
I have help too, but it's still our responsibility as business owners to know it and to be responsible for it. So that would just be my tip. And I mean, it's not unlike marketing. We can't
Yeah.
get you get someone to run ads for you and do that, but if you don't know your messaging and what you're trying to accomplish, it's not going to be effective. It's the same thing with
No,
money.
I
And
see this happen so much and it drives me bonkers. Like I'll get hired in and they're like, "Oh, I just want to hand everything over to you." And I'm like, "You still have to operate as the CEO. Like I am not the CEO of this business for you. I can do a lot for you, but like or they'll hire someone and then it's like, "Oh, they didn't do what they were supposed to." I'm like, "Well, you weren't checking on them. You weren't looking over what they sent you, like you still kind of have to have your finger on like the pulse of your business. So I'm glad you brought that up because so many people do that and it drives me bonkers.
they're not thinking about what success looks like. They're just thinking about getting it done. And there's a big difference. Big, big,
Yep.
big, big. It's like, yeah, bring people in to help you. Just know what you're looking for. Be very clear on their directive. Be clear on
Mhm.
what you're looking for and use it to your advantage.
Yep. They should help get away from you doing the implementation, but you still have to do the analysis, the thought work, the guidance as the CEO of that business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much, Linda, for joining us today. And I didn't mean to like cut you short or anything. I know we were just running over and I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate you joining us today so, so, so much.
Thank you for having me. So great to be here and always enjoy my conversations with you.
Thank you.